Okay, we are live tonight on the Exchange podcast. We seem to be going live a lot more since the COVID-19 has forced everybody into their homes. So why not do these interviews live? And that's what we're doing tonight. We're also going to be live on our new channel, LibertyCaster. LibertyCaster is a new website, libertycaster.com, that is for independent content, trying to get our own voice out there. And so we are streaming live on that channel as well. Check out libertycaster.com and go to the Facebook page, LibertyCaster, and follow the page. Tonight, joining me, I have Sam Robb, who is a Libertarian presidential candidate. Sam, hello. How are you?
Doing fine, sir. How are you doing?
Doing good. Thank you for joining me tonight. I know we got a late start.
Happens.
It's been a hectic day, been a busy day for both of us, but we are here, and we're here to talk about your campaign. I've had some conversations with some other candidates. I really enjoy a lot of candidates, and I've become a fan of yours. I like what you stand for on a lot of issues. I'm going to hit some of those topics tonight. But first, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the guests and anybody who's going to be watching, who you are and why Sam Robb for Libertarian president.
Okay. My name is Sam Robb. I'm a software developer from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I'd say about 7-8 years ago, I got fed up with the Republican Party. I stayed registered a Republican long enough to vote against Romney in the primaries and shifted my party registration to Libertarian. And last year, about this time last year, I realized that I'd spent some time joking about running for president, just kind of making light of it. And I realized that one of the reasons I was doing that is I was very uncomfortable with the way the country was going, the direction we were taking. And I decided to step up and make that real. Registered with the FEC, which actually was a whole lot easier than filling out my daughter's FAFSA forms. Spent some time trying to see what goes into a presidential campaign. And one of the things I decided to do was to make my platform one that tries to appeal to registered Democrats, registered Republicans, and kind of bridge that gap. Like I said, I'm a former Republican. I grew up in a blue area in a red state, so I feel like I have a unique opportunity and a unique capability to reach people from very different political backgrounds and speak to them in a language that they understand. So I've spent the last year or so campaigning. One of the things that I really appreciate is that as a relative nobody, I'm just a guy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've managed to make it into some very, very significant debates, get my voice heard. And I attribute that entirely to having a very pragmatic, results-oriented sort of set of policies and campaign issues that I'm working on. I like to describe myself as a pragmatic radical. I ultimately would like to see the country reach the point where we have an absolute minimal federal government, where as much as possible is handled at the state and local level or by private industry or private organizations. But I recognize that overall, people in America are not used to that anymore. We need to take some time, get people reacquainted with liberty, introduce them to some ideas, show them how liberty works to solve their problems, and get them on board and supporting us as we continue to roll back the state and change the direction that the country's headed in.
Well, Sam, we just had a debate last week, and you did really well, and I was very impressed. And some of these candidates. A big problem that we have is a lot of libertarians, when you get to a debate, they all agree on the same key issues because they tend to be principled in their ideas, and there's that very basic platform, which is what attracted me to the party to begin with. It's a very simple. It doesn't have to be complex. We don't have to make government so complex, and government in itself has become so complex that it's almost like they want you to not really understand what's going on, so you feel that you have to need them. So, and you have to become dependent on them. And there you go. Every 4 years, we keep doing the same thing, electing both DNRs, and they're both cut from the same cloth. I think libertarians had that platform that takes the best of both parties but actually is principled to those ideas. And then, when we do a debate, there's a lot of agreeing. So, but I did pull out a couple issues that maybe cause some, that are a little bit different that libertarians tend to stay away from. But first, I want to get we had 2 late entries into this race. Well, potentially 2, but we have 1 definite. Right. Jim Gray, Judge Jim Gray, who was the 2012 vice presidential candidate who was nominated and ran with Gary Johnson. And then we have the potential and the talk of Justin Amash, who is a former Republican who is now considered independent. He ran back when the Tea Party conservatives were, after President Obama was elected, and got a lot of traction. And President Trump threw him out of the party because he dared disagree with him. So that is what, how Justin Amash has become independent. And now he's talking about, he started an exploratory committee already to run for president. And without question, he's going to. The Libertarian Party seems to always nominate the shiny object that comes in late. You've been on the ground with a lot of the other candidates running around, right, busting your hump, going to debates, going to state. Right. Justin Amash is not showing up to one Libertarian Party state convention to, hey, I'm here to run as a Libertarian. So, how do you feel about Judge Jim Gray jumping in this late? And at least Jim Gray has been a Libertarian before and ran before as a Libertarian, but now Justin Amash and all the talk about him.
It's interesting. One of the things, actually, you mentioned the Shiny Thing Caucus, which is really fascinating for me. My wife, up until the Pennsylvania convention, was a registered Republican. She switched her party registration, her voter registration, joined the Libertarian Party because she wanted to join me and be a delegate down in Austin this year. And so she's been a Libertarian for a little over maybe 2 months at most. And when she heard about, I mentioned to her that Amash might be jumping in the ring, she started talking about the Shiny Thing Caucus. So I mean, I'm very proud of her. She's a real Libertarian now. No, it's interesting when Gray and Larry Sharp announced. I actually was kind of I won't say excited about that, but it was very interesting to me. I was very intrigued. I don't know much about Jim Gray. I had to do some reading and catch up on him. I have met Larry a couple of times. I've watched a number of his shows and listened to a number of interviews that he's done with people, Libertarians talking in coffee shops, sort of thing. And I like him a lot. And my wife loves him, thinks that he's just a fantastic guy. So, looking at him, I say, okay, well, if he thinks that Jim Gray is a good guy, I'm willing to take his word on it and go from there and see where Gray stands. Like you said, Gray's been in the party for a while. He's not coming into it late because he was waiting for the opportunity, but it seems, from what I've heard, people talking about it was Lincoln Chafee dropping out of the race that made him think that he needed to step in and fill that gap right there of someone experienced legislator in the race. Amash is an entirely different beast. I mentioned on Twitter yesterday, somebody was asking about it. I guess the best way I can put it is, obviously he's not my first choice. He's not even my second choice. But I am a delegate. If I do end up voting, I don't think that I would be voting for Amash. However, if he does get the nomination, I'm going to do everything I can, my dead level best, to make sure that we see him across the finish line.
Right. I mean, I guess the good thing is that at least he fought against Trump and didn't fall in line with the other Republicans within the party, and be fearful, because Trump has united the Republican Party like nobody has in a very long time, and he did stand up. So I give him credit for that, and I respect him for that. But he's waited a long time. He waited out to see how he would primary. Then he knew he was going to lose the primary and be challenged by Trump, so he jumped out, went independent. Then he didn't raise enough money to beat the Republican that's going to be running for his seat. That's what concerns me, is that he didn't get involved early. It's always a late jump in with the Libertarian Party. Now, another concern I have, because you just mentioned you're a delegate, and the convention may not occur because of the COVID crisis. Are you concerned that leadership will just pick the safest pick versus the best pick? Because there's been talk about how this convention would happen. We don't know whether they're going to do a digital convention, they're going to push it back. I've heard a rumor that the party itself, who the elected members would select the candidates and then hold their election later in the year. So that could all, because you want the Libertarian candidate to be campaigning against Trump and Biden.
Absolutely,
on the main stage as early as possible. We're already late getting in the game. The Libertarian Party is always late getting in the game in the races. You hear about them last. The candidate needs to get mainstream media press to have any impact at all. Are you concerned about what's going to happen with the convention and how the candidate gets picked?
Absolutely. I mean, first off, I've got a lot of confidence in the LNC leadership. I've got a lot of confidence in the campaign committee. Everything that I've seen from them, they've been very, very upfront about, hey, we're not sure what's going to happen. Don't want to lose hundreds of so there's a bunch of issues that all tie into this, a bunch of people trying to figure out how to make it all work. As far as selection of the candidate, honestly, I have no doubt that if there is a need, if we get to the point where we can't have a convention, where it does fall to the party leadership, the national party leadership, to select the candidate, that they will do that by soliciting input from the delegates, from the state committees. I don't know how that would work, but it certainly is. If you do it and it's transparent and it's obvious that the majority of the delegates are going for person A or person B, or there needs to be a couple of rounds to settle on that, at least there'll be some insight into what's going on. I don't think that they would make a decision absent that. It just doesn't make sense, especially not in an age right now where we've got so many people getting used to doing bigger meetings, doing bigger conferences, over the internet through, using Zoom, using other teleconferencing. So,
do you think that the Libertarian Party should jump on a similar platform that the Republicans and Democrats use by primary, by state, where earlier, because when you do the Iowa caucuses, you got the Republicans and Democrats campaigning. It's big news. There's no Libertarian caucus involved with the primary.
Right.
There's no news at all. So people are only paying attention to the two main parties at the get-go, and then they hear about the Libertarian candidate a month or two before the election. Should the party itself possibly move to a similar primary system that is put in place by the Democrats and Republicans? I know that we don't like to admit or try to copy or emulate anything that they do because of good reason, but in order to get in the game and get more media attention from the mainstream media at the beginning, should that be an option?
It could be. I mean, it depends on which route you want to go. One way is to say, okay, we're going to change things around. We're going to have binding primaries, at the state level. That's really where the whole impetus for the Democrat and Republican primaries comes from. You can see people building up momentum and building up delegates as the primaries roll through the different states. With the Libertarians, because we don't do not binding primaries, we don't have that. We can have Sam Robb can win Iowa, and then the next month, everybody in Iowa can decide that Sam Robb's a complete jerk, and they're going to go vote for whoever they want. So that would require a change in the way we do things. If we want to keep things as they are right now, and just say, hey, okay, yeah, we recognize that delegates are the ones who are really important. They're the ones making the selection. We don't want a bound primary. I think we really do need to look at pushing the selection of the candidates back, possibly even a year in advance. So instead of having the national convention in 2024 and picking a presidential and vice presidential candidate months before the election, we need to back that up a year earlier, 2023, say, yes, here's our pairing for the 2024 election. Now these guys have a year and a few months, a year and a half to get out there and to be the Libertarian candidates and to talk, instead of campaigning among the Libertarian Party, talk to the American people. We absolutely need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the party gets late, and a lot of things that help the Democrats and Republicans stay so powerful in the process is the fact that they get so much media attention early on, mainstream media. Somebody who's sitting down watching Fox News or CNN is watching the candidate's campaign, hitting all these states.
Mm-hmm.
They are covering zero libertarians because libertarians are doing that, but they're doing it at the state convention level, and they're not doing it in like a primary where every single camera is in Iowa for the Iowa caucus. It is like the biggest thing in politics at the time. If there could be the libertarian candidate walking around doing that primary, I mean, you could possibly do that type of system, but give the delegates, allow them to be flexible in their vote when the time of the convention comes, because things could change. They don't have to be completely solid on the candidate, but you could at least get that media attention right off the bat.
Yeah.
That I think that would be important to move the party forward. Let me hit some actual campaign issues. Like I said, you were on the debate that I hosted last week with the other four other candidates: Ken Armstrong, Mark Whitney, Adam Kokesh, and then taxation and Steph Berman. We hit a lot of issues, but there's some issues that libertarians tend to stay away from, or that don't get brought up at a lot of debates or conventions. And I you take a different stance on some key issues, and I would like to tackle them. First, starting off with your position on pro-life. Pro-life within libertarianism. It's a very, people just want to stay away from that topic completely. But you are outright outspoken pro-life.
Yeah.
Should government, and I think I know this answer, but if you could elaborate a little bit more on why you stand pro-life, should government be funding abortion clinics? Period. They do fund these clinics, and at what point would you be, I guess, where, I mean, we're talking about rape or incest, where that pro-life stance would be. Explain your stance.
No. That's actually one of the interesting things about the Libertarian Party. One, you do have people with a bunch of different viewpoints, and I've lost track of the number of times I've been in a convention, and I've had somebody come up to me and go, oh, you're the pro-life guy, right? And I'm thinking, oh, geez, here we go. We're getting into it. I'd like to talk to you a little bit, and I end up having a 5 or 10 minute conversation with someone who is very much an anarchist, very much coming from a pro-choice bodily autonomy point of view, but who really wants to understand, hey, how can you come from a different point of view? You seem like you're such a reasonable guy on so many other things. Why do you end up here? And the Libertarian Party is one of the few places you can have those sorts of conversations. And even if you don't agree on when life begins, or I think that bodily autonomy trumps right to life and before birth, however you want to shake that up, at the end of it all, you can say, but we agree that the government shouldn't be funding any of this. And oh yeah, sure, yeah, no problem, no question there. So there's at least some points of agreement. As a pro-life libertarian, and I'm going to be very kind of weaselly here and say that actually, if you talk to any of the candidates, I think you're going to find that we are all one way or another, we are pro-life. What we're talking about here is not whether we support foster care, or whether we support adoption, or whether we support stopping wars, foreign wars, whether we support immigration and children and families coming here to live and better themselves. We're talking about one particular issue, and that's abortion. And as a minarchist, as someone who believes that we are going to have a government of some sort, no matter how hard we try, that we can get it down to the absolute minimum. We can hold it down to an absolute minimum. But the minimum purpose of government is to protect life and protect people from violence, protect people from theft, protect people from fraud. If you go that route, you really have two choices. You can either say that an unborn child is not a human being deserving protection until some point, until they are have a heartbeat, until they are capable of existing outside the womb on their own, until they're born. You can either say, hey, here's an arbitrary point, at which point the state is going to say that's a human being and therefore is deserving of protection, or you can recognize that a human being is a human being from conception, and the function of the state is to protect life. I know that there's a lot of people that get very uncomfortable with that, with the idea that, oh, you're going to force me to give birth. No, you engaged in an activity that resulted in a biological change in the creation of a new life. You're responsible to that life to see it through. You do not have to say that I'm going to commit to being a parent. You do not have to say that I'm going to commit to spending 18 years of my life raising this child, but you did bring that life into existence. You're responsible for getting that child to the point where someone is capable of taking care of them and someone is capable of raising them. Whether you really want to acknowledge that.
Looks like we have a loss of a connection.
And going back to going back to what you were saying, you mentioned rape and incest, and I do get some pushback from some people who are adamantly pro-life, who think that like I said, life begins at conception, and therefore any sort of abortion is unconscionable. I would tend to agree with that, except that there's a couple of exceptions. Rape is one where a woman is denied consent. The idea that you're responsible for a life you created, it depends entirely upon whether or not you made the choice to engage in an action that results in that. If you had no choice, I believe that in order to prevent something like the government being able to say, oh, yes, by the way, now this is an example of how we are allowed to use your body to sustain somebody else's life. By the way, we need your liver, and your heart could be used for this guy over here. And to avoid that sort of situation, which is absolutely horrific, I think we need to say, yes, at that point, there needs to be a choice. And if you're talking about a situation where there's an actual threat, where pregnancy is a threat to the mother, we're talking a threat to life. It happens all the time. It's not common, but it's one of those things you have to acknowledge can happen. In that case, you have two lives in balance. You've got the mother and you've got the child, and one of them is capable of making a decision, and one of them is not. So in that case, the decision falls to the mother. So those are a couple of places where I would say yes. There is an exception for this is a life or death decision that needs to be made. This is a place where choice, volition was not exercised. Other than that, I believe that the position of society and the government should be to protect life.
And I'm gonna play devil's advocate on an issue, and then we have a question from somebody who's watching that I'm going to post up in a second. So the foster care system, and we're talking about whether pro-life, obviously you want, even if they don't want the responsibility to care for the child, but to give life, they've made that choice. It is their obligation to follow through with it. The foster care system is a complete disaster. It's very no question. It's a damaged situation, the foster care system. A lot of the juvenile offenders who get involved in, they fall through in the system. I've seen firsthand how poor they are and how bad the system is. Teenagers are just free to come and go as they please, and nobody's really watching them or giving them guidance. How would you, because you obviously want to protect life, how would you change the system with the foster care system to better prepare it for a pro-life country?
One of the things I think with the foster care system that you really need to look at is it's government getting involved. So obviously you have all sorts of issues. I would like to see us return to a case where we have private charitable institutions that are responsible, orphanages that are responsible for taking in these children and taking care of them, and working to see that they are taken care of, that they find families, that they're adopted, or placed with families that can care for them. We try and do that now, but of course you've got 600 different competing priorities, and when you're talking about government, and you don't always see the best interest of the child represented there. When you have a situation where someone says, yes, here's a situation, I have an institution, I have an orphanage, I am dependent on somebody else contributing to us to help us. My heart and soul is here in helping these children. I think you get better outcomes. So one of the first things I would do would be to see the child care system opened up to private organizations. And again, when you talk about that, people immediately, I think, leap to, oh, for profit. No, there used to be huge charitable networks in the United States. We need to rebuild those in these cases. The next thing would be to one of the things that I think that we're kind of seeing now, strangely enough, with COVID-19, but that we need much more of, is governors stepping up and being responsible and working together in order to develop frameworks so that their states can interact with each other, as opposed to the federal government mandating from top down, hey, this is how things are going to be. Because the people in Pennsylvania, people in Ohio, people in Wyoming, we all have different ideas about how things should happen. And I think as a state, as counties, as states, we can come together and we can work on these sorts of things and say, okay, hey, here's what we need to do. We managed to spend some time and come up with some agreements about how we're going to educate kids. That's essentially where Common Core came from. Was a state-led initiative. Hey, why don't we come up with something that we can agree on for between states to say, this is how we're going to share information about these children. This is how we're going to work on bringing families together. Here's some of the criteria that we're going to use. And instead of having one massive organization, you have a bunch of smaller private organizations working with larger entities at the state level, saying, okay, this is how we're going to get things done. If something goes wrong with an orphanage in Idaho, that does not mean that the entire system collapses.
Right.
And that's really what we need.
Localization.
Much more decentralization. Yeah.
Right. Localization. The people within the county, the town, the community could, care for the children within that community by having one of the charitable organizations handle that, and they obviously can make contributions to keep that going. If the problem in one community is you have a lot of children that need a place to live, a home, then the community should come together and provide that for them, not the federal government, because the federal government. Right. I always use the, when a product gets too big, quality control becomes a problem. And I'll use an example that I know of, Car Arms. Car Arms is a firearm company. They had a big contract with a police department. The second that contract went through and there was a mass need for those guns, a lot of problems came because quality control got lost because they weren't able to handle the amount of firearms they needed to produce. Yeah. Therefore, quality control is a problem. Federal government operates the same way. Gets too big, quality control is a problem. But we had a question. It was put up a little bit ago, and we got off topic. But I'd like you to answer it. Okay. So we had Denise Noel. How would the Electoral College? This is obviously based on our last topic. How would the Electoral College vote for a Libertarian candidate? Aren't they obligated to vote for their respective parties? We're talking about a federal. You are the candidate, and now you're running. How do you get delegates to back of Libertarian if they don't adhere to them?
It depends on the state. There are some states that, and this is one of the oddities of our federal government, is that at least you recognize that we have an electoral college. Some people don't even understand that we have a vote in, for example, here in Pennsylvania, we have a vote if the Republican wins, at the presidential level, there's a slate of electors that the state says, okay, here's the Republican electors. They're going to go to the Electoral College. or here's the if the other side wins, the Democrat side wins, here's the Democrat slate. What would happen in that case would be that the Libertarian Party would have to have their own set of electors. If Sam Robb was immensely popular in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and all of Pennsylvania, and we won the state, 50.01% vote went to the Libertarian candidate. We would have to pull together a slate of electors and say these are the representatives that our party is sending to the Electoral College. And some states will split and say, okay, we had 60% of the vote went one way, 40% went another way, so 60% of your electors get to go and 40% of your electors get to go. But again, that's up to the state. So we would have to comply with the state laws at that point to figure out how that's going to work. Now, once you get to the Electoral College, if you've got a close contested race, anything can happen. Really, there's the possibility that you might have what they call unfaithful electors. Someone who gets there and says, you know what, they said that I'm supposed to vote for Biden, but I just saw that yet another, there's another dozen women that are saying that he sexually assaulted. And I can go talk to that. I'm going to either refuse vote, or I'm going to vote for another candidate, or I'm going to vote for a candidate that isn't even part of one of the other parties. You can end up with situations where people just refuse to vote. So it can get kicked over to the House of Representatives. There's a lot that can happen there, but ultimately, if we are to act in accordance with state law and in accordance with federal law, we're going to reach the point where we start winning states. We need to have electors that are ready to go to say, hey, yeah, this is someone who's going to go to the Electoral College and is going to represent our party and vote for our candidates.
Denise, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, so I mean, it makes sense. People get so confused because of what has been in the news ever since Trump won the election about how the Electoral College is evil, and but what people need to realize, states like Pennsylvania, who has a key issue, okay, and the key issue in Pennsylvania is natural gas, big for your economy, fracking.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of talk about, from the Democratic side that fracking, they're going to eliminate fracking. That affects the voters, workers. People have jobs in the fracking industry, so they're going to align their votes in a certain way and want to be represented different than somebody who's in New York City. Nobody fracks in New York City. It's a totally different voter base. They have different issues, so yes. they're going to vote differently, and then they're going to send their candidates to the Electoral College, their selected members to the Electoral College that are going to vote in their best interest. That's why Democrats, it's through the states. So thank you, Denise, for that question. I want to get into a little bit about civil liberties, okay, and what you would do to make changes regarding mandatory sentencing. Another big issue that libertarians run on is the criminal justice reform and mandatory sentencing, victimless crimes. Where do you stand on the mandatory sentencing guidelines?
Mandatory First off, it's an oxymoron, right? Mandatory sentencing guidelines. That's like saying, the anti-murder guidelines, right? It's mandatory sentencing, and mandatory sentencing is ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. The idea there is that there are some crimes that are so significant that the judge and the jury are not allowed to exhibit any sort of in this case, the judge is not allowed to exhibit any sort of judgment, which again is built right into the job description. Judge is not allowed to execute judgment on a case. So you might have somebody that comes in and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they said the wrong thing to the wrong person, and now they're up on some sort of drug related charges. And the judge looks at it and goes, you know what? Technically, technically they presented the case, but I can see what really happened here. I'm going to sentence you to 1 day or 1 week, right? I'm going to fulfill the letter of the law, but also do my best to fulfill the spirit of the law. when you have the mandatory sentencing, you are saying, no, you don't get to fulfill the spirit of the law. You don't get to make any sort of judgment. You might as well get the judge out of the equation, because all they're doing really is running the courtroom at that point. They're, because the sentence says, if the jury decides one thing, or then the sentence has to be this. So it really, mandatory sentencing is nuts. It really needs to go. It's the cause of a lot of issues that we're having right now. When you run into situations where, just as an example, someone can murder someone, and find that their mandatory sentencing is less than someone who was caught with 2 ounces of marijuana in some states, right? Okay, first guy gets mandatory sentence 3 years. Second guy, oh wow, that's 2 ounces, so that's 2 mandatory sentences, and now he's in for 4 years. So now you've got some guy who was just going to a party. He's spending 4 years in prison for mandatory sentencing, when there's a murderer who gets out a year before. That sort of stuff's ridiculous. That's what those sorts of things lead to. No common sense, no judgment, no human interaction, and just it's a bad idea. We've seen it over and over and over again.
I think it takes the humanity out of the, because every case is different. Not everything is cut and dry, black and white all the time. And I think we've seen over time that, all it does is fill the federal jail system, and that costs billions and billions of dollars. You got to feed, you got to house, and victimless crimes also is another big part of the libertarian platform. And something like marijuana, which a lot of states are independently legalizing. So marijuana is legal in the state of Colorado, but you drive across the border and then you can get charged federally.
Yeah,
marijuana. So
talk to Adam Kukish about that. Yeah,
yeah. So
he's run into that. Yeah,
that's a main issue at the and the Democratic Party has been pushing the legalization of marijuana on paper, but never follows through. So they like to take that idea that the libertarians run on, but never come through on it. And a libertarian candidate like yourself may actually come through on that promise. I think if this, the states are making these changes, the federal government is not very good at prohibiting things. Get out of the way. So I listen. I think that's a very well thought out answer, and I appreciate it. Energy and the environment, big issue. The Democrats have this Green New Deal, massive spending plan that is unsustainable long term. We know that. Anybody who has done first grade math could tell when you add up the numbers, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
We already have 24 trillion in debt. We just added 2 trillion with the stimulus bill that went through. I'm sure more money is coming in the next months that we're going to drain and pass on to our grandchildren. Whatever party seems to win tries to kill the other party's agenda. So when the Democrats win, they are for clean energy and killing coal and oil. Republicans win, it's the opposite effect. The Libertarian Party preaches free market. We know that this country is not a free market. It should be. It's supposed to be, and it's principled to be. But it's become a crony capitalist society where the rich lobbyists down in D.C. get what they want from lobbying these politicians that are career politicians. Another problem that we have, and we can get into forever, is how a politician is able to make a career out of a service. You are there to do a service to your community, and that's why it's every 2 years you're supposed to get elected if you're a House representative, 6 for a senator. Sorry, I'm starting to ramble on. This is it becomes I get off on this, but energy and creating competition. Is there a way that a libertarian candidate could create the environment where you just remove all the subsidies, all the lobbying out of the way, and allow the clean energy to fight the dirty energy, if you want, oil, coal, and the American people will make the right decision. Nobody wants dirty water. Nobody wants dirty air. Nobody wants what they saw at the Olympics in China, where there's smog every day. We don't want that. Right. We have a beautiful country with beautiful landscapes, and that's what the people want. If we just remove government from the equation, can the people themselves and a libertarian presidency allow that competition to happen, and the green energy will just knock off dirty energy on its own?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that one of the things that I think we struggle with, and we're seeing this very desperately right now across the country, is that people tend to see things in black and white, right? You either want to open up the country and you want everybody over the age of 50 to die, or you want to seal the country up and destroy the economy and everybody to starve to death. There's not a whole lot of willingness to see the middle ground, which is kind of frustrating because I think honestly there is a lot of voices. There are a lot of voices. There are a lot of people. The middle ground is a lot bigger than we think. It's just that the two extremes tend to get so stinking noisy that they're shouting across at each other all the time, and that's what the conflict sells. Somebody saying, hey, there's room for both sides. Both sides have good points. It doesn't sell papers, doesn't sell advertising, it doesn't bump up your ratings. Okay, so there's a reason to generate conflict there. We see the same thing with the Green New Deal, and you're talking about coal and gas subsidies versus. It doesn't have to be one or the other. What we need to do is get the subsidies out of the equation entirely, right? Let these different energy sources and energy resources compete with each other on a level. What we're going to find is that there's not one answer fits all, because there's some applications for which you need the idea of having some sort of portable liquid energy source really works.
Right.
And those are the sorts of things that you're naturally going to gravitate towards for those. If it turns out that battery power is something that people want and something that is that we're capable of doing, to an extent that we can actually benefit from it. And I'll be honest. 10 years ago, I looked at electric cars and I said, right back of the envelope calculations, here's where they would have to be in order for me to think, yeah, it might be worth it to buy an electric car over a gasoline powered car. Here we are 10 years later, and I'm looking at those calculations and going, well, I guess I should be looking at an electric car now, right? Not because the government's making me, not because people are shaming me into it, but I'm looking at it and going, they've actually got the technology to the point where it makes sense. Right. And when we free the markets, we end up with people coming up with solutions that nobody could possibly have dreamed of. There are companies out there that are working on next generation nuclear power systems that make our current reactors look like something that was cobbled together back in the steam age. We have the opportunity to move forward and to experiment and to allow industry and individuals and companies to work with some truly innovative energy sources, whether that's solar, whether that's nuclear, whether that's geothermal, whether that's natural gas or gasification of coal. There's a whole host of possibilities out there, and every time the government gets involved. And again, I hate to keep going back to this, but this is the situation right now. You see COVID-19, the government got involved, and what do we have? We have contaminated COVID-19 test kits. We have not enough test facilities. We have we know how to do this. We know how to pick the winners and losers in the labs that will be able to do these tests. And oh, look at that, we completely screwed it up. We have a living example right now of all the ways that the government gets in the way of solving problems. Right. When we get the government out of the way of the people who want to solve these problems, that are trying to solve these problems, we're going to have a better environment. We're going to have cleaner water. We're going to have cleaner air. Because, like you said, nobody wants that stuff. Right. And a wealthy society, what you see worldwide is, as a society becomes wealthier, they become more concerned with the environment because it's a shared good and people enjoy it. If we want to see the world, if we want to see an environmental movement blossom across the world, here's what we need to do: get people involved in free market capitalist systems and lift them out of poverty. And once they have the ability to stop and they're not fighting to stay alive, then they're going to be able to say, you know what? I really like having clean water and clean air.
Yeah.
Let's keep doing that.
Yeah, nobody wants that, and I feel like the government's trying to, always has to use the scare tactic to force you into a position, and we all can make good decisions for ourselves if we're given the information. So independent people who do studies, doctors and scientists, they will pass on the information to the public, and if you get out of the way without filtering that information to fit your side, we can see better results. And another example of poor subsidies is the education system and colleges, because the federal grant backing of the loans is what caused the prices to go up, and that's a whole other topic I could spend a day on. But yeah, it fails every time it tries to take control. There's so much wasteful spending thrown in. The last main topic I want to hit with you while I have you: immigration. You have a different position than most libertarians. I actually agree with your position. Other major libertarians like Larry Sharp fits his position, Raj Teray, they've all taken this position as well. It's a little brave to take in the Libertarian Party. Immigration, you say that you are closed borders, open doors. Okay.
Right.
My question to you, and this is something that's always a concern to me, is how do you vet people that are coming to this country with the mindset of an open border policy, which a lot of libertarians like Jacob Hornberger is running on an open, like the doors wide open policy. How do you vet people coming across the border or from overseas, doesn't matter what country they're coming from, that are coming here to obviously for a better life? My father is an immigrant. I'm completely for immigration. I think the narrative gets twisted a lot and they try to use certain words, versus illegal immigrant, or we don't want to like use the word illegal either, or undocumented immigration.
Yeah.
How do you vet people that are coming in? Because I don't, 100 years ago, there was no vetting process either. So where do we put vetting into this?
Yeah, that's immigration gets to be an issue, and what bothers me about that most is it's the reason why it's one of my top 3 issues. I've got a very personal connection to it. You mentioned your father was an immigrant. Yeah, I wouldn't be here if my great grandparents hadn't immigrated to the United States. My children were born in China. All 3 of my girls are adopted. I work in the technology industry, so I'm surrounded every day by some really brilliant people that come from all over the world, literally. And immigration gets to be touchy, but I don't think it needs to be. I think it's something that's been used to divide us. When I say open border, or closed borders, open doors, I like to say what I want to see us return to is an Ellis Island model of immigration, and that's really important to me to use that, because when you're talking to someone who is a more conservative bent, you start talking about Ellis Island, and that brings back ideas of these are people who came to our shores. Give us your poor, you're tired, your huddled masses yearning to be free, right? That immigration is a very positive thing. It's what built this country. It's what made America great. Forget what Donald Trump's talking about. It's what made America great was bringing all these people here who said, you know what? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I don't fit in here where I was born. But there's a country where I know that I can be free, and that they want me to go there. That you take people back to that place, and you remind them, hey, that's what made America great. But you also remind someone who is on the more progressive side, the Democrat side of the house, hey, but it was a time when we had our arms open, but we were still doing our best to make sure that we were protecting the people that were already here, not just citizens, but the immigrants that had come here already. Hey, nobody wants to bring someone in that has the next version of Ebola. Nobody wants to see someone coming in that is wanted for murder in 3 different countries, right? We want to make sure that, hey, the people that are coming here, or at least we know that they are healthy. There's nothing wrong with them. And in all honesty, given the state that we're in right now, where we are as a country, a lot of that is not going to be, hey, you're sick, we don't want you here. It's going to be, you're sick, why don't you let us take care of you before you come in? And that, yeah, we need to get into that mindset that anybody who wants to be here, honestly, is somebody that I want in this country. I want people like my friend Zach, who came here, didn't speak a lick of English. And now he's got a business out in California where he's got multiple stores that sell Dickies work clothing. Right? He's a successful businessman. He built himself up from nothing. That's the kind of people that I want to see here in this country, because that's amazing. That's what's going to make the United States prosper. That's what's going to allow us to be a blessing and a benefit to people across the globe as we generate new technologies and new products and new ideas. And ultimately, I'm a little bit of a visionary. I'm a little bit of a science fiction buff. I want to see us head out into space. And I want to see us colonizing Mars, colonizing the asteroids. I want to see us expanding into the universe. And we're not going to do that by saying, yeah, but you can't come along.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is, we need every hand that we can that is willing to pitch in order to succeed, because that is going to make everything that we do that much better.
Being a sci-fi guy myself, I'm going to make a recommendation. If you haven't seen The Expanse, check out The Expanse. It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime right now.
I read the books. I have.
Okay, so yeah,
I saw the first episode, and I looked at that and I'm like, as soon as I find some time, maybe next, this in a couple of months, I'll be able to sit down and watch this. But oh my goodness,
well,
I love the books.
I was in quarantine for 2 weeks when this COVID thing got started, and I sat here and watched the entire 4 seasons straight through. Awesome show, and if you read the books, I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So we're gonna wrap up here. I want to give you. Camera's going to be on you, and you're going to make your sale here. I want to say Trump is a billionaire who has been successful in uniting the Republican Party, a strong, united party. I mean, literally, they just do whatever he says, which I want to remind people, the job of Congress, the House of Reps and the Senate is to act independently as a separate but co-equal branch of government. So you do not have to follow everything the president says. There's supposed to be a battle, and there is none. They're throwing themselves at it. Joe Biden is the established Democrat who has been a lifelong politician, and he clearly has Obama's support now. Everybody just jumped out of the way for him. I can't figure out why. I haven't, there was a lot of other candidates. I don't know why he's the candidate, but he is. I'm going to give you the floor here. Why should we select Sam Robb, Libertarian, over the Republican Donald Trump and Joe Biden?
Okay, wow. Simply put, if you put me on stage with Trump, you put me on stage with Joe Biden, I'm going to be the adult in the room. You take a look at those two. They are built for bluster and conflict. They are built for prevarication and dissimulation. Neither one of them is capable of actually connecting with people. And that's one of the things that I think is important to understand. That if we do have a libertarian candidate, if I were to end up on stage with those two, people are like, well, what are you going to do to, own Trump, or what are you going to do to put Biden in his place? I'm not going to do anything, because I don't need to convince either one of those. Those guys aren't voting for me. The American people is voting for me. So those are the ones that I need to connect with. Those are the ones that I need to establish some sort of understanding with. And compared to Trump, compared to Biden, like I said, I'm the adult in the room. I'm the one who is coming to them and saying, you know what, these guys, neither one of them understands what it's like to live in America today. Neither one of them has lost a job. I have. Neither one of them has had to lock down because of COVID-19. I have. Neither one of them has dealt with a situation where they were wondering where the money was going to come to pay the bills. I have. just like every other American out there, with the exception of those that happen to be New York millionaires or career politicians. I've had to live life, and I've had to learn what it means to be an American. And I've learned over and over and over again that one of the things that I look forward to the absolute least is spending time dealing with the government. Whether you're talking about the DMV, whether you're talking about filling out tax forms, whether you're talking about filling out FAFSA forms for your daughter, or unemployment claims, or whatever it is, you're never happy dealing with the government. So why do we do it? We do it because we think there's no other solution. And the truth is, there is. The truth is that for hundreds of years in this country, we lived without a pervasive government. We lived without a personal income tax. During that time, we fought wars, we prospered, we spread across the continent. We entered into a new age of prosperity. We entered into a new age of discovery. And everything that has happened in the last 100 years has been a failed experiment with, well, why don't we try and do things differently? Why don't we try taxing? Why don't we try big government programs? Why don't we try? And it's failed. The war on poverty has left us with more poverty. The war on drugs has left us with more drugs and more violence. The war on terror has left us with multiple wars overseas going on and on for ages without any end. And honestly, with the government finally in Afghanistan admitting that for the last 18 years they haven't been really sure what they're doing. It's time to put an end to that failed experiment, and it's time to start shutting down the government and going back to where we were, a successful country that welcomed everybody who wanted to contribute, that let people live their lives the way they wanted to live them, and that helped the world grow and expand and prosper. If you like that idea, if you want to see someone on stage talking to the American people about that, check out samrob2020.com. Check out my policies. Throw some money my way. I always can use a little bit of a contribution. Talk to your friends. Tell them that they need to understand that there is a third way, and it is a successful way, and it's the one that will win. Thank you.
Whoa, listen, cut that, put that on your website. Bravo. You're the 6th presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party I've interviewed, and that was the best closing I've had yet.
Oh, thank you.
I listen, Sam, that was a great sell. If you are watching, you must check out Sam's website and look at his campaign. That was, maybe I'll change my vote. So
thanks, man. Thanks.
But listen, I want to thank you for coming on and taking the time out. I know we got started late. I apologize. Completely my fault, not Sam's fault, for the late start tonight. But no. I do want to remind everybody who does watch this podcast here, we are now on LibertyCaster. LibertyCaster is a new network that I've created. We have go to libertycaster.com where you can find libertarian-minded content, and we are in the process of recruiting other great content creators to the page to get as much content out there. We have Radio Free New York, who was we shared today their video from today's episode. They're 5 days a week, and we have a couple other productions in the works. Sam, it was wonderful having you on. We do have right after that speech, we have a comment here from Aaron Richmond. Would you like the opportunity to guest on my podcast? So you have a podcast request from another podcaster that wants to hear more from Sam Robb.
Okay, fantastic.
And definitely check out Sam Robb's website. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget, if you want this on the audio version, we are on every single podcast catcher. Thank you once again, Sam. And it was a pleasure. I'm privileged to have met you, and we've had these conversations with you. You're a great guy.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Absolutely, Kevin. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you.